In these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger livecast.
We're all born to be born to be born to be rich. We're all born to be 'cause we are rich beyond our wildest dreams. That is what we have always been. Until now it remained to be seen. Now here to come clean. We're all born to be rich. Born to be rich. Born to be rich. Born to be. I don't measure myself by no man's perfection. I cannot walk his steps, they're not my reflection. Oh, I wouldn't want to walk in another man's shoes. Make my own decision, not what he choose. 'Cause I'm not playing for another man's team. No, I'm not living over another man's dream. So come on people, don't get it confused, yeah. 'Cause we are winning, we can never lose. 'Cause we're all born to be rich. Born to be born to be rich. Born to be. I know it's true, I see it in my dreams. We're all born to be rich. My heart wide open, I see what I believe. We're all born to be rich. And one day we will all see what I believe.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. We just saw the performance Born to be Rich by Jörgen Gario and Mirte Hartland, spoken word artists, musicians. And welcome, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to this live cast here at Pakhuis de Zwijger, part of Amsterdam Roots Festival and in collaboration with Sites of Memory. This evening is going to is part of a program called Amsterdam Verteld. It's a platform for storytellers every Friday evening here at Pakhuis de Zwijger. It's a donation-based program, so we would like to invite you to, if you can, support the artist. You can do so by donating via the website of Pakhuis de Zwijger or Amsterdam Roots Festival. So if you can, please do. This evening is a full program, an exciting program with live performances and also conversations with historians and with artists from South Africa and the Netherlands. The program will be around the theme Future for the Past. How do we look at history and how does history inform us about how we see the future? We will invite you as our audience to also be part of this conversation, so you can ask your questions via Zoom. The Zoom link can be found on the website of Pakhuis de Zwijger. So if you're looking for the Zoom link, please go to the website, to our program and tune in. Just to introduce myself, my name is Katy Streek. I'm a theatre maker and a programmer and co-founder of Sites of Memory Foundation. This evening I will be your co-host, together with my colleague and my friend Jennifer Tosch.
Good evening, everyone. As Katy said, my name is Jennifer Tosch. I'm a culture historian. I'm the founder of Black Heritage Tours in Amsterdam and New York State. I'm also an activist and a co-founder of Sites of Memory Foundation. This year's performance is really going to be an exchange between South Africa and the Netherlands, and it focuses, as Katy said, on the future for the past. We're going to look really closely at the connected histories. How do these both countries and how do they respond to these different narratives? I think I'm really excited, and first we're going to start with a short video of our emergent memory from the year past. I invite you this evening to travel back in time, to immerse yourselves, your bodies, your minds. The story of slavery in the Netherlands is a story of the changing lifestyles.
How we bring their lives closer to our own.
For the last 4 years, Sites of Memory brings programming that brings together artists, spoken word, dancers, musicians, visual artists to interpret how do we look at our colonial past? What are the hidden stories that we often don't see or that we ignore or forget? And this year is really about the emerging memory, looking at how do we connect these histories. In Amsterdam, if you've ever been here, you've probably been on one of our tours, or hopefully you have. I've been doing the tour since 2013. And one of the things we really focus on is the built heritage. The image that you see behind me is of a gable stone. We call gevelstenen. There, at the time, the height of the 17th century, there were thousands of these gable stones that were symbols. Think of them like street signs before people could really read and write. This was a way of identifying what the building's function was, the owners, the products that were being warehoused in those buildings. And this particular building, this gable stone, is of Cornelius Tromp. For my American friends, not to be confused with the Donald, no relation. But Cornelius Tromp was an admiral of the Dutch fleet in the 17th century. And I want you to look closely because you'll see several images in this gable stone. There are 9 naval ships today, they're named after him. But I want you to notice the little boy. Do you see him? I mean, really look at him. Who is he? We don't know his name. There are many gabled stones in Amsterdam and throughout the Netherlands that have these symbols. He was a symbol of wealth, status, like a trophy, frozen in time, never aging. There's another image of his wife, Margarethe Roophorst, with the same little boy. Usually they're children, very innocent, childlike figures, dressing or adorning, again, as a symbol of wealth. I got tired of calling him little boy. It was so important for me to restore his humanity that I named him after Saint Maurice. I named him Morris.
Kojo, Abeku, Kojo, Abeku.
spleet de zee in twee om hier te komen, Morris. Je spleet de zee in twee om hier te komen, waar ze van grootheidsdromen, achter gevels van goud, waar duivels wonen. Jongen, je lach zoals je moeder je zag, je naampjes gaf. Lief klein jongetje, Morris. Misschien zou jij de wereld zien. Je leerde te jong om een man te zijn. Je leerde je scheren, de doden vereren. In een zeemansgraf rechtop te staan op de bodem van een oceaan. Hoe het voelt. Hoe het voelt om zo zichtbaar te zijn. Hoe het voelt om 16, 23, 45 te zijn. Jij bent niet meer klein. Je spleet de zee in twee om hier te zijn.
You split the sea in two, Morris.
Welke vragen stellen wij? En kunnen we het antwoord horen? Kunnen we ons herinneren zonder woorden? Jongen, je spleet de zee in twee. En vroeg iemand jou om hier te komen? Of werd je meegenomen? Morris, Morris, je spleet de zee in twee om hier te komen, Morris. Sorry, sorry, sorry.
Song Morris was part of last year's performance Emerging Memory. Each year we bring a different performance, highlighting a different theme and different sites. The audience is not sure what is scripted, and bypasses become part of the performance as it's outside in the street. It's site-specific, and the city becomes a theatre. Now we are going into a conversation with our performers, the performers of Sites of Memory. Great. Well, thank you very much for this performance. Thank you for being here tonight. This evening we are talking about the theme Future for the Past. So just to start off with the first question, Future for the Past, what does that mean to you? This is a open question. Jomecia.
Yeah, I see the face coming my way. What does it mean for me, future for the past? For me, it means recognition. It means being visible. It means acknowledging. And I think bring power to myself.
Okay. And for you?
Well, you're welcome. I mean, performing these pieces is really, it feels as if it's a certain type of filling a void of some sorts. And that's also what Future for the Past means to me. It's writing not necessarily a new story, not necessarily rewriting it, but adding to the story that is, so it becomes complete in different perspectives, not just one narrative.
Thank you, Mirte.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, I guess. And also the idea of what is the future for the past, that you cannot really have a future if you don't have a past. Future can only exist in opposite to a past. So if we don't write the past, there will be no future. So for me, this is my association with the whole term. Like we need to still write those pages before we can have a future together. Yeah.
And last year you were working with this historical narrative, with the past, and you wrote the piece Morris, the one you just performed. Can you tell us something about your process?
I think like this is a cliche that some songwriters use. They say, well, the songs write themselves. But this was actually what happened with this one. I was just playing these very simple chords, and I always want to do something complicated, but then it turns out that I need to keep it simple. So I was just playing it, and then because Jennifer told me about that she named the black boy on the gable stone, and I thought, well, but and also in the book of the heritage tours, there was it said like anonymous black child. So I was thinking about that name, like Morris, and then it kind of wrote itself. I called up on him, really, like, where are you? Like a mother to a child, so something like that. And then the song appeared. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if I think back on last year's performance, Emerging Memory, this was actually a moment in the performance that was very emotional for a lot of the audience members. Were you expecting that response? And also, how was it for you, also reflecting on this particular history as a white person?
Yeah, I was very careful with it at first, because when I first wrote it, I thought maybe I should not do it, because it's very problematic as a white person to create an identity for this boy. Because, the plantation owners who gave the names, who created the identity, I thought maybe I shouldn't do it. But then, because Jennifer already named him, I thought I might use the name. And then I was thinking about maybe what can we be sure of with this boy, so I don't create the identity, but we just know about, okay, he probably had a mother who loved him. Then he left, and he split the sea in two, so he traveled. Then he arrived somewhere where he was very visible because he was black, and there were not many black people at the time in the city. So these were like very facts, and I tried to create poetry out of these facts, and also that he was a boy, and he remained a boy. And this was something that was done to keep people small and to portray them as smaller and childish. So I thought I age him in the song. So I had him grow up in the song to become a man, to become older. So this was my thinking process, and this is how the poetry came about, really.
Okay, thank you. Jomecia, you are going to be performing for us tonight. Yes. But can you tell us something, because you work with a lot of different performance styles in your work, or different dance styles. Can you tell us something about your background?
I started dancing at a young age. I started with what they call the technical dances, so ballet, modern, jazz. And then, there wasn't really, I wasn't really brought up with like African types of dances, and I really had to search for it myself. So I think maybe 6 years ago, I went to West Africa for the first time, and something just opened up for me. I felt recognition, I felt seen, I felt, like I came home, even in my movement, in my body. So then I started to switch up. I started to switch up styles, and not even like totally switch up to only go to traditional West African dances, because I'm a European woman. I like to say I'm an Afro-European woman. So I mix, I think, what I've learned here with what I do in the West, but it's also what I learned in West Africa. But it's also a interesting and difficult subject, because what is really, if you look at dancing, what is really Western dance, what is really African dance? That's a whole deep topic. So it's different styles, but I like to say that it's just what's been given to me from my ancestors.
Okay. I'm going to make quite a jump because we're talking about this historical narrative and how we create performance work from it. And Jörgen, you already presented one of your songs, but actually during our rehearsal process, you said that actually at this current moment in the Black Lives Matter protests, that the meaning of your work changes. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, the piece we are going to perform at the end is part of what I said before. There's a certain type of pain pocket that opens up a completely new experience of this work. Because before we were trying to create this future, and now it seems as if there are many more ears willing to hear this future that we're presenting. There's a lot more, I want to say, animosity and vigor that uses these art forms now as a driving force to propel it even further. It's basically a catalyst. And I feel as if the work has gained another dimension now, definitely. So I feel I feel as if this is an important time in which we use art to make the voice louder.
Yes, thank you so much. We will leave this conversation with that. Thank you so much. And actually, at the moment, we are going live to Cape Town to poet Toni Stuart, who will present to us the poem "The Woman Speaks."
Thank you, Katy. The woman speaks. My tears spill down the flank of Devil's Peak. My breath is the cloth that sets Hurikwaho's table. I am the one who invites you to eat. I am the one who invites you to eat. I am the child of two gods. My heart is a Hollander, but my soul prays to Hitziep. I am the one whose bones are strong enough to carry the weight of two skins. I am the one whose mouth is supple enough to hold the secrets of three tongues. If you meet me in the veld, know my feet have already returned to the fort. If you meet me inside those castle walls, know my heart has already returned to the dunes. No matter who I tell you I am, do not believe me. No matter who I tell you I am always only half of myself.
Thank you, Toni. That was beautiful. Welcome back, everyone. We're now here for our second part of the program, our panel discussion. I would like to introduce, you've already met Toni Stuart. Also live in Cape Town is Jay Pather. Hi, Jay. Can you hear us? Okay, great. Choreographer, curator, associate professor, and director of the Institute for Creative Arts at the University of Cape Town. And in the studio here with me is my colleague Nancy Jouwe, culture historian, also independent researcher, lecturer, author, and also next to her is Raul Balai, a visual artist and curator. Would you like to add anything else to those? I'd like to say both of you are activists.
We're also colleagues.
You're colleagues, we're friends, we go way back. So welcome to them. And we're going to discuss the roles that art and history play in moving us. And I'm going to use some terms that you might not have heard before. Historical distancing. And I'm not sure if I created this idea, but because we were so involved in the social distancing idea, it seemed logical. Let's use historical distancing. And moving from historical distancing to this, where we are now in social solidarity. And then how does that get us from this point to real structural change? And that's really going to be the basis of our conversation. So again, what I really mean by historical distancing has for a very long time, it's been a way of denial, of this sort of colonial aphasia, willful forgetting, or ignorance, you could even say. And I think the way we've disassociated ourselves historically, and we're at a really pivotal time, I think, where we have now, because the world is watching, there's been so much of this level up, our attention on these issues, and social solidarity has just been this unity that we're seeing around the world, right? And how the world is standing in solidarity in that pivotal moment when George Floyd was killed by the police. And then getting to that next level we'll talk about last. So first I want to start with you, Toni, there in Cape Town. You shared a poem about Krotoa. She was a Khoi woman who lived in the 17th century, and I use the word worked in quotes because I'm very conscious of, how that's framed. But she was in the household of Jan van Riebeek, who was the first governor of the Cape Colony for the Dutch East India Company. She learned to speak Dutch and Portuguese, right, and was an interpreter as well. Would you tell us what inspired the poem for you?
So the Woman Speaks is part of a collection called Krotoa Ewe Suite, a Cape Jazz poem in 3 movements. And what I set out to do with that collection was to reimagine Krotoa's story from her perspective as if she was the one telling it. So we don't have access to her story in the archives from her perspective because it's written in Jan van Riebeek's journals, in her husband, who was a Danish man who ended up in Cape Town, in his journals. And so her story is kind of written through this white male gaze. And we know how violent and diminishing that gaze is. And so in reimagining her story, my intention really was to look at what's possible for us as Black and Brown South Africans when we start going into our own histories and reclaiming them and writing them from our own perspective, not from the narrative of the kind of colonial gaze.
Beautiful. And Toni, still with you, as we are reframing these colonial narratives, I think all of us in our work in some way are involved in that, in adding to or what has been forgotten or ignored. Why is her story, do you think, so important for us to remember?
When I was researching it and learning about her life, the thing that struck me is that she was a woman who was at the forefront of engaging with the first settlers. And there's something about what's been taken from us as South African women by not understanding that our female ancestors were right there at the beginning. They were right in the mix. And so what kind of strength, what spiritual, emotional strength and resource can we gain from understanding her story more fully and understanding what it is that she went through and how she worked. And I was thinking about Toni Morrison's notion of interiority, that idea of what is the interior lived experiences of our ancestors in a way that humanizes them and that also allows us, my work is, I'm very interested in what are the resources from the past, because we know the trauma and we know the wounding, but what are the resources from the past that we actually don't have access to because the power and the wisdom and the knowledge of our ancestors was forgotten and buried and hidden from us. And so that for me is why her story is important. It's about what the resource that it gives us in this moment.
That's beautifully said, Toni. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to turn now to Nancy. Nancy, in your work over the years, you have really, at least from my point of view, used your work to bridge this gap of historical distancing. Can you share how you have really developed your career? This is before becoming popular as it is right now, in using that idea of reframing and creating this bridge of historical distancing.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, it was sort of part and parcel of my daily life as a child at the kitchen table. I heard stories every day. We as children would listen. My father would talk, a typical classic patriarchal setup. And but I took a lot out of that. And so I think I was inspired by it. And so before I became, researcher on this topic, I think I was already, cultural producer wanting to share the stories with a larger audience. Like, so how you have this sort of discrepancy between the kitchen table is constantly, infused with those stories and the food that you have with them. And then the outside world does not know anything about it. So, and it's painful, you feel completely disconnected in a sense. So how do you also make the place where you live your own and your home? For me, that was also, feeding that space with stories about that colonial past in the case of the Netherlands. So that was kind of, I think, the intrinsic motivation without me, always consciously knowing this even. And after a while, I started also researching because I thought I need to know so much more. When you start digging into it, the more you know, the more you really realize that you don't know a lot.
And you've been at this, not to date ourselves, but for many years, before, again, the first in the waves of feminism. How was your work received, or did you find that there was an openness then? And I know it's evolved and changed a lot, but I think for the sake of context, it would be nice to know, what has that journey been like for you?
Whoa, you mean like what it was like in the 80s and the 90s compared to now? So I have to come out with my age?
I know. I'm sorry to date you, sis, but...
Whoa, that's a big question. I was brought up very much as an activist. I would think, again, at that kitchen table, the first time I had to perform and talk about the lives of my people and human rights abuses and whatnot. I was 12, and I actually also had to perform. So,
and for folks around the world who don't know, who are your people?
So my people are manifold, but the people that I'm referring to right now is the Papuan people. My father was a sort of a political leader who had to flee Indonesia because he was basically fighting for an independent West Papua. So we became refugees basically in the Netherlands. But fast forward to the 80s and 90s, my upbringing as a activist was in the squatter scene, and that's where I learned to really fight the system and whatnot. And so at that moment, especially black women in the Netherlands were already pushing forward this anti-racist agenda that we're now again embracing, right? Which Gloria Wekker and Philomena Esset are calling the second wave of anti-racism in the Netherlands. And we can talk about that if that's even accurate. Is it already a third wave? We don't know. But anyway, so that was a very particular moment. And then 20 years ago, so entering the new millennium, we had this strong shift to the political right. And that's when we got this void. And so to return to this decade, this last decade that we've had with, a lot of new type of activism that is going on is like, whoa, what's happening? And suddenly everyone understands what intersectionality is, and there's feminists and anti-racists, and so it's been quite a ride. But I'm thoroughly enjoying it, I have to say.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Makes me a little bit feeling old as well, but I'm learning a lot from the younger generations, and I'm really enjoying it.
And that was actually my next question about intersectionality, because one of the things I think people don't realize when we talk about intersectionality, it's not just about race, but also gender and, sexuality. Why is intersectionality an important part to include in this movement?
I mean, to me, it's central to why we do the things we do. And intersectionality is now perceived very much as a very academic, difficult term, but it really came out of activism. And it really speaks to the fact that we, embody different categories of different identities at the same time. And through those placements, those multiple placements, that there's particular ways that we're discriminated against or that we have a position of privilege. And so it really is about a power analysis that also speaks to, fighting for justice, I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right?
Right. I'm going to turn to Jay in Cape Town for the next question. Jay, currently the Black Lives Matter movement is calling a takedown of specific statues, and we see this happening around the world. But some years ago, it really brings back the Rhodes Must Fall movement. And I've liked, that was in South Africa. So what is, do you think, the importance of this being now included into this movement? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think that the point is that the notion of the memorial is already problematic because it does two strange things. It imagines that the person or the event that is that's being memorialized, especially if it's a statue or a memorial of a person, is of benefit and praise for all. So at one point, Cecil John Rhodes was a hero for many, but now we understand him as some kind of a thief or an opportunist amongst many other ways. But the other is that a memorial it already sits in a sacrosanct space of the past and in memory, as if this is innocently in the past. But memory is not all about the past, it is about the present. And what happens now informs how and what we remember. And these memorials then become kind of agitators and in themselves vindication of current realities of abnegation, which is what I think Black Lives Matter foregrounds. So when a human being is murdered, as in George Floyd, it's seen as a major breaking point because it's a metaphor for widespread and pervasive abnegation of Blackness. And so the presence of these memorials then stop being about the past and become very much symbols about entrenched violence in the present.
There's a lot of debate around this topic, Jay, and here in the Netherlands, part of what makes our tours so, I think, interesting is that the built heritage is so well preserved. And there's some, think that by taking down these memorials that we're erasing history. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different perspective on how we should view this movement?
Yeah, because I think we should understand that history is not one thing. It is highly selective. And it depends on who writes it. It is extraordinary that in a time of subjectivities, we do not see that as the world shifts and as populations change from monoracial little villages to multicultural metropolises, all of the people need vindication, especially public vindication. The point is that I'm sure that no one is arguing that the presence of such artifacts inside a museum, given proper context and framing, is important, but history is contentious and malleable and moving. So we need to find the forms, and I think performative works and temporary installations go a long way to realizing the complexities of history.
And, that makes me think about a conversation you and I had, Raul, about other ways of contextualizing these memorials, because you showed a picture of, for example, a statue that's in Hoorn with Jan Pieterszoon Koen. And could you talk a little about your vision of how this could be reimagined using the same colonial statues?
Yeah, well, in the case of Koen, I think it's my proposal was already in 2017 because we were all part of a group of people who've been working on these kind of subjects for a longer time.
And who, first, for those of us, the audience that doesn't know, who was Jan Pieterszoon Koen? So
Jan Pieterszoon Koen is one of the admirals of the East India Company who is responsible for killing 90 or 95% of the people of Banda.
Banda, yeah.
It's a Malaccan island, part of Indonesia right now. And he has a statue in the central square of Hoorn, a small city or village, I would say, coming from Amsterdam, but it's a different discussion, on what used to be the inner sea of Holland, which is now a lake. And it was one of the bigger partakers in the East India Company. It was really important in those times. So they have this statue, and I would say, like, let's put all people who rose to the Dutch, starting at his entering of the Moluccas up till liberation in 45, I would say, independence of Indonesia, and fill up the square with all those people who rebelled against the colonization of their own country. Because it's ridiculous to me. You have a lot of people of this community, as Nancy is, as my stepmother, she's Molokkan. I got Molokkan family. It's like it's crazy to have this genocidal figure on a pedestal. And people think it's a very old statue, but it's actually from the 19th century, when the Kingdom of Holland was struggling for sort of unity and identity, and our royalty was a bit of in distress, you could say.
And Raul, would you consider your work to be a form of activism?
No.
No? No?
No.
How
This is an interesting thing to me, because I'm interested in the same kind of subjects maybe as an artist. And I work together with people who are activists. But my art is about showing new perspectives about things that interest me or reflect my own position in society. Well, I'm a contemporary artist, but I also am a curator and an exhibition designer for Rembrandt Museum and the City Archives in Amsterdam and the Black Archives. It's a different role, but I'm also a graphic designer. So I think everyone in Holland knows my work, but they don't know it's me. It's the logo of Zwarte Piet's Racisme that's currently on everyone's t-shirt and tote bag. It's mine. The foundation Nederland wordt beter. Also a logo of mine. So it touches up on each other, but as a contemporary artist, to be called an activist artist, I think you should ask an artist if he considers himself an activist or not. I don't consider myself an activist. I address topics that are outside of normal view.
But would you agree that you intervene in the public space
yes, of
with
course.
your work?
Yeah.
And would you see that as a way of bridging a gap, this idea of historical distancing?
Yeah, yeah.
As a contemporary artist?
Yeah.
So, and Nancy, we talked about this many, many times in terms of how these memorials, what should we do with them? And we have a lot of them in the Netherlands. And we were kind of going back just in our text messages about, what does it mean to keep them intact? What's your take on this?
Wow. Well, there's not a one fix for all, to start with, but one of my students this month, I talked about it in class, as you do, and one of them said, well, here in, I think it was Hungary, we actually have statue cemetery, which is still a public space, but the story around that statue is completely reframed.
Yeah.
So you can still go and look at it, but the whole sort of prowess or the part of pride and nationalism is taken away, of course.
I like that idea, actually.
And so, yeah,
a statue cemetery.
But the whole idea of but I also like the part where you tear a statue down as an act of, dynamic heritage as well. Mm-hmm. So that this process of saying as a nation, we're going to tear it down now because we're not about that anymore. I feel that there's poetry in that as well.
But that's the thing. I mean, people talk about putting the statue as it is in a museum. But what is more wonderful than the graffitied and torn down monument in the museum as a sign of times that things have changed.
Because the thing is, also, like what Raul did is an intervention in Hoorn, but that's also, where all the terraces are. People want, so it's never going to be a permanent thing. You don't necessarily.
It should be temporary.
Yeah,
I mean, let it be there for 20 years. Everyone understands it. I hope in 2 decades, and then it can leave
Oh, okay,
to the cemetery or the museum.
Right.
I mean, it's moving all the time, right?
Yeah.
Jay, we're back to you. You're working, you curate the Infecting the City Festival in your work, obviously in the public space in Cape Town. How do you think that the public spaces can enhance this conversation? Or, now we're moving into this idea of really social solidarity. Do you see that is able to contribute to that?
Well, it's kind of the only place, because I think in a public space there's no hiding. You can't avoid it. So just watching those clips of sites of memory work, there are some things that could be extremely uncomfortable, but that discomfort needs to be in public because it's a public issue. It can't just be in conference halls or in little tiny policy-making offices. Infecting the City, I think, does that in some way because it brings people together that you wouldn't normally go and watch a performance with or go to a gallery with. And I think that already starts a kind of a conversation. From that point of view, the public becomes a very, very powerful space and needs to be held and preserved for all publics.
Staying with you, Jay, our theme again for this year is Future for the Past. What does that mean to you? What does that speak to you?
Well, in so many cultures, because the notion of past, present, and future is very symptomatic of Anglo cultures or the Northern cultures, where there's so many flips where the past is the future, and these become imbricated with a kind of a continual living. But there is certainly, at this moment, given both COVID and also the uprisings that have taken place, it's quite important to understand how all become, just as all countries have become implicated in COVID, so do all times need to be, will need to be brought into this particular moment, because we can't possibly have a future if we do not reckon with the past. We cannot possibly be in the present if the future bind with the past, so we can start building and being aware that the building blocks of the past are there. We recognize what they were, how bad some of them were, how they've eroded our societies, and replace them. Yeah.
Thank you, Raul. What does Future for the Past speak to you? What does it mean to you?
Well, quite literally, if I look at how Afro-Surinamese Winti culture works, it's about having a connection with your forefathers and foremothers, your ancestors, and you take that with you, and you put things in the now correctly together and work on that to have peace also in the past and for your ancestors. So I think in that way we're working towards a future for the past by giving everyone a peaceful future, actually. Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Nancy, what do you think? Future for the Past?
Yeah, I can't top that.
I know, that's pretty good, right?
Pretty good.
For me, I've been using this trope for a while now. For me, the future for the past, because I always call myself a time traveler. We go back in time. That's the work that we do, and try to invoke this idea of memory, of colonial memory, of historical memory, and how does that inform where we are today? I don't think we can really honestly talk about the future unless we truly understand and educate ourselves about the past. I'm going to ask this question actually for everyone, and you can answer it if you choose to. There is structural racism, I think, is at the heart of a lot of the debates and the movement and activism in the arts, in the art institutions. And Jay, if you want to answer this from there, or Toni even, how do you see structural racism operating in the arts institutions? I mean, this is this pivotal moment in time. So let's get to the point where we're talking about structural change. How do you see it being affected by this?
Shall I go?
Go ahead, Jay.
Oh, well, you know, we have to understand that the only way that colonialism is not somewhere in the past. That the idea of modernity was introduced as an imposition of colonial power. So coloniality, which is supposed to have ended, is structural. And as long as we understand that, we see how it spins itself in almost every single structure, and in the art institutions in terms of what is prioritized as important and what is not. That which is modern is defined by coloniality, and so it becomes really important to see how these structures are, and you can change whatever you want on the surfaces of it. It's these structures that really need to be examined, and deeply, because they deeply embed certain systems and ways of being that are considered untenable to let go of, which is why it just continually replicates itself.
And in terms of what's happening in South Africa right now, do you see this pivotal moment that there is really an opportunity for this structural change to happen within the arts, within the academy? Are you optimistic?
Not entirely, because we are linked to the liberal economy of the world, and just to say, when Nelson Mandela came into power, the rand dropped; it didn't rise. The South African rand, it dropped. It was most a graphic indication of how the economy is not an indication of social justice. So in much the same way, I think South African government has tried to maintain its place in the world. And so one is not entirely optimistic about what we are the most unequal society in the world. And it's going to take quite a lot of extremely courageous shifts in our economy. And it's terrible to say, but probably the COVID moment, because it reveals so much, so much of our discrepancies all over the world. But in some will ask of us to really think hard and courageously about shifting these systems.
And yeah, that's really, I think everyone's interested in a lot of emails and messages that I get are trying to understand around the world, what are we doing? Toni, did you want to add something to that?
No.
No? How about Nancy or...
Well, just quickly, I think it was last week that one of the Dutch dailies had a very big article about the dire situation in the arts sector of the Netherlands if you look at race. And last year there was a very big article on the dire situation in the Dutch arts sector if you look at gender. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of work we still have to do. It's a very conservative space, a lot of issues there. And
what could be like a first step towards structural change? What do you see that? I mean, I know that's a big question. It's a lot to...
Putting the money where the mouths are, and also taking it seriously for once. It's just... There's a lot of lip service going on. And diversity is just this empty shell of a word that doesn't change anything. And it's a huge problem. And there's a lot of people that maintain that status quo, and that needs to change.
Well, we work around history a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So if I look at art history, art history is just about white art history. Like, people love Picasso, who was a sexist, who was a racist, who exploited African art as primitivism. And it's still like that in all history books that talk about art history. Now some institutions are buying into more minority art. well, we're talking about a global idea about the history of art. And if we talk about the minorities on a global scale, white people are a minority. It's like 9% of the world population. So if we level that out on schools, it's a good start, I think. And I think one of the biggest problems within the art scene is that everyone sees itself as really liberal and open-minded, while ask anyone who is not white, who went to art academy, how that experience was, and it was not fun.
Or studied art history, for that matter.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh
I just
my
had this
goodness.
conversation with Raul this yesterday about this, and okay, we're going to transition now to any. Are there any questions from the audience? It's no questions. Okay, then Katie, I think it's the next is the pictures, right? We're going to see some images from the Roots Festival.
Because this program this evening is part of Amsterdam Roots Festival. It started yesterday and it runs until the 28th of June. Tomorrow evening at 8:30, you can watch the program Roots and Stories live from the Meervaart, where young theatre makers use music and theatre elements to tell their story of being a third culture kid. As someone who grows up between two cultures. This program will be followed at 10 p.m. by a concert of Conjunto Papaupa, live from the BIM House. And now we are going to see the performance Time is a Voice by Jörgen Gario and Jomecia Oosterwolde.
Today, we put light on the map. Unearth and magnetize hearts that were buried without the recognition that they were ever human. We create lyrics for these unsung heroes because time is a voice. And this is how we bring their lives closer to our own. We give them space, a safe place under the same sun in a foreign sky. Here we sing their songs, a rich peace protecting their body of work because they were stronger than God. Now there's a house where a pale face with a paintbrush acknowledges my existence. There's a house on a plantation we own, where the only cruelty we suffer is that the sun is too hot to play in all day, every day. There's a mountaintop that saved water because it remembers their thirst. There's a waterfall still pouring, mourning the lost bodies in the ocean. Today, we plant a tree full of memories so that all the seeds that were cast away can return. If this city is built on their backs, then their skin is not black, it is gold. You've seen an echo of their faces. You've heard a glimpse of their voice. Today, we bring them home.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this amazing performance. This was the last performance of the evening, and it's really to give you a glance, just an idea of what our next performance, Future for the Past, will be like. It was actually supposed to be performed now as part of Amsterdam Roots Festival, but because of the current situation, because of COVID-19, we had to adapt with our times.
We wish we could share more with you, but starting in July, we will actually do a adapted version because of obviously the times that we're in. So join us on our social media platforms, Sites of Memory. We will have, a part of it will be actually still in the city, and part of it will be a digital and online version. We really welcome and appreciate you joining us. Yes, here. And again, in October is when we're going to feature our Future for the Past program for this year.
Yes, it's going to be very exciting. So we hope to see you then. And for now, we just want to thank take this opportunity to thank the funders that support also our work for Sites of Memory. Just to list them, it's Amsterdam Fund for the Arts, Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds, Bank Giro Loterijfonds, Matching Fonds, VSB Fonds, Fonds Cultuurparticipatie. And on behalf of Pakhuis de Zwijger, on behalf of Amsterdam Roots Festival and ourselves, we would like to thank all of our speakers who came here tonight, who contributed to a very insightful and interesting program. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our viewers back home. We very much appreciate you
California
joining
viewers.
us and the Californian group. Thank you so much. And just a reminder that if you enjoyed it and you want to contribute, you are welcome to donate on the website of Amsterdam Roots Festival or Pakhuis de Zwijger. Also make sure you check the rest of their program because Amsterdam Roots Festival is still happening tonight, tomorrow and on Sunday. And for now, we wish you a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.